Pardon me, South Africa, I have an axe to grind. You know the old adage, a fool and his money are soon parted. Or better yet, let me cite it as delivered by the 90s urban poet, Dr. Dre. A fool and his dough gone split, so when you come across a fool, get all that you can get. Well, that's just how some political operators at various levels, inside and outside of the state, as well as their fellow travelers, the supply chain management officials and accounting officers, chief financial officers in government and state entities, hustlers masquerading as business people, and influence peddlers see you and me. We are fools in their eyes, and having come across the fools that we are, they will, in Dr. Dre's words, get all that they can get. How else do you explain this? How I wish I could say the word on air. I'll leave it to your imagination, but it starts with the letter F and ends with the letters E-R-Y. Of course, the story is now in dispute as the department concerned denies it, so let's see how that plays out. But it says a lot that such an outlandish possibility can even be conceived in our country. How do you explain that we spent at least 10 billion rand on personal protective equipment, and among the people smiling all the way to the bank are owners of questionable and obscure entities, some of which were registered just days before or after that fateful day in March when the president declared a state of disaster, triggering the unprecedented demand for these protective aids.
What concerns me and what concerns all South Africans are those instances where funds are stolen, where they are misused, where goods that we have to procure are overpriced, where food parcels are diverted from needy households, where there is corruption and mismanagement of public funds. Increasingly, we're hearing allegations about the fraudulent UIF claims, overpricing of goods and services, violation of emergency procurement regulations, collusion between officials and service providers.
Well, today the hyenas are sitting cushy on mind-numbing piles of cash, while hundreds of healthcare workers and other civil servants are dead from COVID-19. And it's not unthinkable that some of them contracted the virus because of the poor quality PPE supplied by these merchants of dishonesty. Failed to protect them. Those PPEs actually failed to protect them. It was, as it has been dubbed, a PPE tender bonanza. And even small-time crooks and unsophisticated thieves found their goal to rob us blind.
It's all kinds of shenanigans that they play, not declaring income from PPE, even though they get that from government, they still choose to cheat government. They have outstanding tax returns. They file fraudulent or incorrect returns. As I said, they obtain tax clearance certificates by fiddling the system, and they're not registered for VAT. Some examples of what we're doing: 3 companies currently under investigation, totaling 165 million contracts from SAPS. 1 company is owned by a 30-year-old that has received a contract worth 125 million. You'll be surprised to know that many companies are not, they were previously registered, but they were not in the PPE business. We found providers that are registered as pubs, as IT companies, as car washing companies, as property letting companies, as bakeries and event management companies, and they've all been successful, notwithstanding no experience in providing PPEs to government. 17 of those tenders involved politically exposed persons to the value of 1.2 billion rand.
A fool and his dough gone split, so when you come across a fool, get all that you can get. How else do you explain that while you and I were singing Waka Waka, this time for Africa, in 2010, and we had that warm, fuzzy feeling, the construction industry mafia were sitting in smoke-filled rooms, counting their ill-gotten bounty and gleefully laughing as the fools we were, them having relieved us, laughing at the fools that we were, them having relieved us of our money. We buy weapons, international crooks take our money. We buy trains, Chinese companies pounce with the assistance of treasonous leaders and their friends from Saharanpur, who are now fugitives from the law. We built power stations, accused number one, as the ANC president has dubbed his own party, is at hand to throw the javelin from within the bounds of government policy and infrastructure decision-making, only to pick it up where it lands in the juicy stake of the Eskom build project, as accused number one did under the guise of the party's then Chancellor House investments. Irregular expenditure by national and provincial government departments and entities amounted to 62 billion rand last year. That was up from 51 billion rand the year before that. For perspective, that 62 billion rand is just 8 billion rand shy of the 70 billion rand we've now had to borrow from the IMF. We are not poor. We are not a poor country. We are being robbed. Wasteful expenditure in those two spheres of government, 849 million rand last year. And get this, 4.1 billion rand over 5 years. 4.1 billion rand flushed down the corruption sewer, gone. And stop buying this nonsense about unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure not necessarily amounting to corruption. Wake up, people. That may be so technically, but these shenanigans provide perfect cover and an open flank for actual corruption. A fool and his money are soon parted. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of being a fool. On that note, your corruption scorecard for this week. In the spotlight, procurement corruption, and it stinks to high heavens.